So Gordon, please come up and share with us this morning a little bit more about Yooralla. Looks like that you played in the game, the Hawthorn Adelaide game. Happy days, huh?
Happy days, not always, but this week good.
Excellent. Over to you.
Thank you. Let us just pray together. Lord, this morning that your words would be spoken and through your Spirit we would receive from you both a blessing and a commitment to serve. In your Son's name, amen. Hi. For those of you who do not know me, my name's Gordon Buxton. My beautiful wife, Lorraine's up the back. We have 3 girls and we have 7 grandchildren. So we're very blessed as a family. Yooralla Youth Ministries commenced in the early 1990s with just a small group of young people, including myself as a young person. I thought someone would smile. As a response to a calling of God to work alongside young people who primarily would never see themselves walking into church. And that's where our journey began. For the first few years, we did a lot of trainees, groups across a number of churches, and we started taking teams of young people to Mexico, of all places, to do home building. And the thing I discovered there was by taking a young person, no matter where they're from, what their place is, away, you got 3 or 4 weeks to share Jesus with them. And they had 3 or 4 weeks to discover that they were more than who they thought they were at the time. It took me a number of years to work out why they were so effective. And then I sort of discovered that it was because we were sharing relationally our own faith in God by doing something practical, because we used to build homes in Mexico. In 2002, I felt a real strong call of God to step into East Timor, or Timor Leste as the technical name is. I didn't even know where the place was. Within 3 or 4 months, 3 young people who'd been on our trips to Mexico, who had come to faith through our ministry, rang and said, God's been speaking to me about East Timor and Yooralla. And so I decided this can't just be a coincidence. This was of God, this calling. And so the 4 of us got together. We contacted the Timorese pastor living in Sydney, and he said, well, you need to go across to Timor. You need to go and just discern what God is saying to you. Because I thought I was just taking youth groups and doing stuff that we always had done for many, many years. You'll see here the island of Timor Leste, or the island of Timor, had a really brutal and just awful 400 years. You'll see that in 1550, the Portuguese colonised Timor. What that was code for was they actually brutalised the country and took over control because they needed sandalwood, spices, and other minerals that they were getting from the ground. And so they ruled Timor as a colonial ruler. In 1975, there was a glimpse of freedom when the Portuguese withdrew, but sadly, only a few months later, the Indonesians stepped in. And it was a regime of brutality and genocide. About 40% of the entire population were either killed, starved to death, or imprisoned and didn't come home. And it was an awful period, and I haven't got time to go into the depths of that place. But in 1999, there was a referendum under the auspice of the UN, and the population overwhelmingly voted for independence. As the Indonesians withdrew in 1999, they killed over 10,000 civilians, families and children simply on their way out, and they destroyed 70%, that's 70% of the entirety of the nation. Roads, schools, buildings, they blew up the water supply, they ripped out the electricity, they took everything out and said, if we can't have it, you can't have it. And so I wondered why God was calling us here. And just before we went, I was in church one morning, and God gave me this just vision of an old man up in the hills who would come over to me and ask for prayer for peace. And when we spoke to Sam, who was the pastor, he said, good, we'll change everything we're doing. I said, but okay, you're the boss. So off we went. We got to East Timor, and the international airport was a 44-foot container on a runway. At the time, Sam said to me, show me your list. Show me what we're actually going to be doing in the next 2 weeks. So I reluctantly gave it to him, and he tore it up. He said, I believe we're going on a prayer walk. That's all we're doing. We're going on a prayer walk. And so for the next 2.5 weeks, we drove around Timor, and to say that was for me a significant change in my prayer life, in my listening to God, is an understatement. I wrote a diary from what God was saying to me. When I came home, my wife said, do not show that to anybody, because how could we do any of that? And yet, over the years, God has shown us page after page of the things he's called us to do. When I look back, I don't know that we'd have ever started if God had revealed all of it today or in that day. So, referendum 1999, independent nation in 2002, regarded as the poorest nation in Asia and amongst the poorest 3 or 4 countries in the world. It had a child mortality rate from waterborne diseases of 30%. Can you imagine that? 30% child mortality rate not making their 5th birthday. You had unemployment, 65%. 80% of the population was under the age of 21, because Indonesians had actually destroyed and killed all those in leadership, all people had escaped. So in 2004, I met 2 amazing mission ladies, the most amazing people I've got the privilege to ever know. And we stood at a hill and we shared Matthew 13, 31 and 32. They shared what God had placed on their heart, because they both had come from Brazil and I'd come from Australia. And that God was placing in us mustard seeds that were going to grow and be part of transforming the people of Timor. Over the next 10 years, we rebuilt a village called Sutulan of 40 homes. We built a disability centre, first ever in Timor, and I'll get on to why in a moment. We established a teacher development program called Ascada, which in Teton is Lift Up. We started bringing dental people, nurses, coming for short-term things. And we built a school and a preschool. And then again in 2012, I felt the nudge of God when I was with a group of people, and I said to them, I need to share with you, I'm a crazy guy. And people will all agree with that. I said, I sense God has called our ministry to serve you. And I shared with them part of what God was saying. And I said, and I know that all sounds crazy because I only know 2 of you. But I said, I have this overwhelming sense in God that I'm to share and to form ministry with you people. And so I said, that's okay, go away, and I can be a bit crazy. They came back the next day and said, God has been speaking to us for 5 years about coming together, sharing resources, sharing needs, sharing who we are as people. And he has been saying to us, we need someone to prompt us. Not to take over our ministries, to prompt us. So we sat down, I remember clearly, I don't know, we cried, we laughed, we sensed that this was a God moment. And so we formed the Timor Leste Children's Fund under the umbrella of Yooralla, because that's the legal entity, that we would facilitate the things they are doing but not own or not take over. One of my principles is you won't see our name anywhere in Timor, in anything we do, because I believe God called us to serve. And so we started with 4 partners. I'm heading over next week. One of the exciting things is that in October, we're signing up a 5th partner in a very remote area who lives in the only town where witch doctors gather and are trained. It's a very dark place. And this couple were called from being in the largest church in Timor, in Dili, to this remote place to be God's people serving into animism. Very exciting, and I've known them for a few years. So from there on, I just want to take you through very quickly the 4 partners that we have. The first one is called Project Montana, which is Timorese or Teton for place on the hill or place in the mountains. They have, today they are run by a 22-year-old person, is the CEO of the organisation. The oldest person in their team is about 28. So these are youth, young people. They run a cafe, they run a restaurant, a B&B, they do language classes in the district, they work at the schools sharing Jesus. They have some amazing internationally known artists today. It's an incredible group. They're a faith community where this trip we are introducing Alpha Youth. We are training their leaders to reach the district of Alayu with Alpha Youth. Now, it's a bit tricky because my English is okay, my Teton is awful, but we're actually going to do these programs and we're training young people to lead. So this is Project Montana. Great guys. The second of our partners is Casa Vida. Casa Vida was started in 2008 for child victims of sexual and physical abuse, and continues to be awful. And again, part of it's the animist religion, part of it's the culture, part of it is they're just vulnerable people. I actually chair this organisation. The first child that came to us, I was having coffee with a friend and somebody dumped their abused daughter at the steps of the restaurant. And Simone and I looked at each other and went, what do you do? Because it wasn't in our plans. And the response was, we need to do something. And so you'll see here that over the last, whatever number of years that is, we've had 850 residents come and spend anywhere from 3 to 6 months until they become adults, because whilst our objective is to always reintegrate young people back to family and community, that's not always possible. They run a ministry to children. We do training. We have a holistic approach to care. And there's a faith-based community centred around children, not centred around adults. This next trip, because I'm back there for, I think, almost till Christmas. UNESCO and the UN Women are doing a review and a case study on Casa Vida to model child protection across Southeast Asia, because they believe our model of seeking to reintegrate back to family, having life skills training, having vocational skills. We run a cafe, we run a handicrafts business, and we connect with people in town in salons and things. And blended right through that is faith. That the UN Women's are saying, we're looking for a model for Asia that is no longer orphanages, and you are not an orphanage. And so they're actually meeting next week, and then I come back with some of the work with that. So really awesome. But to see lives change who come out of abuse is just significant. The third partner is Kids Ark. Kids Ark runs an education program. The school, actually I typed that wrong, the school is now about 500 students. We have 2 medical centres that, again, we've had the privilege of building. In this photo is on the left is Soraya, and on the right is Branca, the 2 ladies I met on the hill in 2002. The most significant people I've ever met. But education, medical and healthcare. Next. Disability services, community development programs. We built a disability centre in 2012 against the wishes of the government. At the opening of the centre, the health minister, I always love this story, took me aside to the toilet, closed the door where she cried. And she said, I have never seen people want to do something for people with disabilities who are hidden people, abused people in our society simply because they're disabled. And she asked, could we sell to her the design? And unfortunately I had a stick thing and a plan. I said, these are yours on the proviso you build more for people. And it was like, and you'll see my last slide, the outcome of that in 2012 is that we're building now a national centre with the blessings of government as opposed to the opposition of government. So disability services, community development. There was a future for a medical and health centre, land purchased. That's all very exciting for us. And I'll come back to this as a conclusion. Our fourth partner is a group called Jami Shalom. In Teton, I don't actually know what it's an acronym for. All I know is it's the Baptist churches who came from missionaries from Brazil Baptist churches. They have 6 churches and they're in the process of planting another 2. And they have a large school of 750 students. And if you wanted to know what was similar here, it would be like a school in the middle of southeast Sydney or Mount Druitt. It's in a place called Birapite, which is where all the gangs are, all the things you'd rather not hear about are. They're in the process of planting churches. We have the privilege of supporting their pastors. And if you want to support a pastor for a year, it actually costs 5,000 Australian dollars for the senior pastor and 4,000 Australian dollars for the other pastors. because they live and minister in areas that would never afford a minister. But for 4,000 Aussie dollars, that's a full-time wage for a full-time pastor, which is really exciting. One of the churches actually is in my diary, in a place called Timor, which is basically the national tip. And the villagers derive their income from what they can scrounge off the tip. And so a church was built last year. It already has 150 in the congregation, and we're in the process of working with them to grow, because I don't know how to stop the growth of people coming to the Lord in that tip. But just again, amazing people. They are our partners. Let me just share with you what's currently happening. We're building a national disability and health services centre with the blessing of government, which is extraordinary. Under animist beliefs, if you have a disability of any sort, it's because you deserve it, is my blunt way of saying it. And therefore, you're either shunned, hidden, abused, or killed. I know of a case only when I was there in April, a young boy was sacrificed to the whole witchcraft components simply because he was disabled. And just, I share that with disbelief sometimes. But and so people with disabilities in Timor historically have always been shunned, put aside or killed because they deserve it. Now that's changing, and internationally that's changing. They are hidden and marginalised. In 2006 we established, or Branca established, a home visitation program to visit people in their homes. And we used to take nurses over and people who would go and be part of visiting at home. In 2012, we built the first centre, which is the one I described a moment ago. In 2014, we purchased, I won't get the size of it, I'm not a builder, but I think it's 5 to 10 acres of land, because we sensed that something was coming that needed to have land for it. And here we are, actually that should be 2024, we developed a 5-year plan to establish a national disability centre. You'll see the guy in the wheelchair came out of Bible college last year. Magos is now the pastor for this disability ministry. I'm really excited because it's just changing things. It is government endorsed. The girl here, Jacinta, we've named the entire centre after her. She was the first girl that came into care in 2006. Sadly, she passed away a couple of years ago. But there's her legacy. She came from being a person in a back room that was dirt to being an active participant in the programs and a person always sharing her faith, because she came to faith through this ministry. And then just the last slide. Let me just show you. I'm doing a book at some point. It'll be mainly photos. This slide that doesn't look so good. We've built, there are 12 buildings in this facility, and we have enough funds for the first 2. And so God always says to us, he gives it to you when you need it. So the first building, you'll see that's the land, and it started in April, the building. We've got about 30 tradespeople at various times over the next 2 months coming to finish the training and develop centre in brackets church. because the government told us if we don't call it a church, no one's going to object. So in all the footings, I think that's what it's called, young people with disabilities put their hand in. We know it gets covered over, but part of being hidden is knowing that your handprint is in the foundations, and that the foundations of this national centre is young people with disabilities. So I love that photo. So I'm really grateful that we as a church family are supporting our ministry. In fact, I feel really humbled that you guys are doing that. I sense that the legacy we leave is a transformed nation that includes people with disabilities as just normal, everyday people. And in April, when I was there with meetings with the government, I said, won't it be wonderful when the first disabled person is in government? And they said, the way it's going to happen. I said, won't that be wonderful? Which means you'll need to have ramps and all sorts of things in Parliament to enable that to happen. I said, we're happy to be part of that. So I just want to close with just a verse from Romans 9 from the Message Bible. And I don't know how many times I've shared this in Timor. I don't know how many times people have seen this and seen that's us. I'll call nobodies and make them somebodies. I'll call the unloved and make them beloved. In the place where they yelled out, you're nobody, they're calling you God's living children. Isaiah maintained the same emphasis. If each grain of sand on the seashore were numbered and some labelled chosen of God, they'd still be numbers. Salvation comes by personal selection. God doesn't count us. He calls us. I've got to say, I've seen probably 300 or 400 young people come to faith in God in Timor in the time I've been there, and there's countless others. This will be hung in the Disability Centre. We need to call all people by name and share the good news of Christ with them. We're privileged that God called us for such a work as this. We're humbled that the church is now part of the team, part of the journey. So thank you. Amen.